today who hurt his hip, and he is doing okay, which is terrific. So we are going to get started. Again, Jeremy Rosenstein, I'm a member at Romemu. I've been teaching Hebrew for about 10 years at Romemu. So we'll say the blessing, and Caroline, are you able to share that?
Yes, I can. You're gonna have to stop screen sharing for a second, though. Yeah.
All right, I will do so. Second here. All right, we'll say together, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. And in addition to that, we'll wish Rabbi David a refuah shlema, which is a full healing, but we'll also wish him something called hachlama mehira, which is a speedy recovery. Hachlama mehira. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the weekly portion, Parashat Vayikal. Vayikal, which I really enjoyed preparing. It's a very powerful parasha that speaks about community, it speaks about art, and hopefully we'll cover a lot of those things. So let me give us a little bit of background here about Vayikal, which, by the way, Vayikal means, and he congregated. And Moshe congregated everybody, Vayikal. He congregated the nation of Israel. So a little bit of background to bring us up to speed. After returning from the mountaintop, after securing forgiveness for the people after the sin of the golden calf, Moses assembles the people, and he does two things. He commands them first, right off the bat, to observe the Sabbath, and then he goes on and he instructs them to build a tabernacle, Ohel Moed and a Mishkan. And what's striking about this parasha is that he does that in amazing detail. For verse after verse after verse, the people are instructed to build a tabernacle. But everything, if there are any artists or architects online, everything from, it's like a scope of work, like specifications, details, everything from color, design, building method, and it goes on and on and on. The people are instructed to build the tabernacle. The people on Israel, they donate generously under the artistic inspiration of Betzalel and Oholiab, who we'll see a little bit later, are really two like chief architects. They are architecture partners, if you will. Previously, the people had lost their sense of ethical direction. They were fragmented. So now, what does Moshe do? What does he need to do to change this? That's what this parasha is about, what Moshe needs to do to change that fragmentation, that splintering within the people. So he has to build a community. That's what this is about. So how does he do that? I'm going to talk about how he does that. He understands, Moses, the power of galvanizing as a community as opposed to individuals. He understands the need to galvanize as a community as opposed to splintered groups. So now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll start reading some of the verses. So we'll read a little bit, then I'm going to open up for some comments, questions, and then we'll read a little bit more and do the same. So I'm going to go ahead and share here. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Can we see this? Okay, good. All right. ויקהל משה את כל עדת בני ישראל, ויאמר אליהם, אלה הדברים אשר ציווה אדוני לעשות אותם. Moses then convocated the whole Israelite community and said to them, these are the things that Adonai has commanded you. Vayakel Moshe et kol adat bnei Israel. Moses assembled the entire Jewish community, etc. Why would the Torah mention that Moses assembled the people? Something that occurred every time he was told by God to address the people. By the way, this is Or HaChaim speaking on this verse. So Or HaChaim says, I suppose that seeing the people were afraid to face Moses after they had seen his face emitted rays of light. He had to issue a call for a general assembly so that some people would not stay at home for fear of being blinded or burned by those rays. This may also be the reason that the Torah emphasized that Moses assembled the entire Jewish community. So if you read the Hebrew here, the key is that he assembled the entire Jewish community. So Or HaChaim goes on to say, another reason for the call for everybody, the importance of assembling everybody, all may be similar to what I explained in Exodus 25:2. For every man, etc. The word included orphans and minors and women. Everybody needed to participate. Moses actually used two expressions of amplification, i.e., et kol. The reason Moses used only two amplifying statements here, namely et kol, and not a third one representing the wealthy, for example, is simple. There was no reason why the wealthy person would not come, even if not especially invited, seeing he would be happy to be part of the community. So what Or HaChaim is saying is there are certain people didn't need to be invited, like the wealthy, they would show up. But there are many, the orphans, the widows, people who don't usually show up as part of the community. That Moshe says everybody needs to show up here. Okay, so let me ask a few questions and we'll open it up briefly. Why did Moshe need everybody? Orphans, minors, children, in view of what happened last week, right? With the story of the golden calf. Why did Moshe need everybody? One, why did he observe them immediately to observe the Sabbath? Why that mitzvah? Why observe the Sabbath? And three, what dynamics does Moshe understand are at play here when we're talking about a large group as opposed to smaller groups? Moshe understands that he needs to get everybody here, absolutely everybody. So I'm going to open it up very briefly, first on Zoom, if there's anybody, and then here in the room. I want to hear some thoughts on why everybody, why the Shabbat, and why, and what dynamics are at play here. And so I just need to get, okay, sorry, let me just see who's on the screen here. If you have any thoughts and want to raise your hand, let me know if there's anybody.
Raise my hand.
Okay, go ahead.
Because he knew they were a stiff-necked people.
Okay, stiff neck, but why
One
everybody?
reason.
Okay, Tomas.
I would just hesitate, maybe I misunderstood you, but I think there's nothing that would make the wealthy likelier to show up than the poor or the widow or the orphan. It's precisely the widow and the orphan who know the importance.
Hey Tomas, could you speak into the mic a bit more, please?
I'm just questioning the assumption that the wealthy are more likely to show up than the orphan or the widow, because the orphan and the widow know the importance of showing up and being shown up for. So even though it may be more difficult for them, it's also perhaps more urgent to them in their understanding of the importance of showing up. I think there's plenty of wealthy people who don't show up. There's no evidence that there's more likely to do that.
Taking issue with Or HaChaim, appreciate that. Okay, and Tomas, I'll just say, I think you missed this maybe when I said coming in. This is especially important for art and architecture, and we'll get to that. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, any other thoughts? Yes. Why Shabbat and why everybody?
Why everybody is the concept of wholeness.
Wholeness. Okay. Wholeness. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts?
We have
Okay.
Amy online.
Yeah. Yes, please. Sorry, I'm trying to see the screen here. Go ahead. Let me see here. On the screen. Sorry, I'm not seeing everybody electronically yet. Okay, Amy.
Hi.
Anybody?
Rashi points out that the people were assembled by Moses' speech. That, in other words, had they been slaves in Egypt, they would have been assembled forcibly, physically and forcibly. But here, they are assembled because they want to be assembled. That he asked them to be assembled, and they complied because they wanted to comply with Moses. They want to be a community, and
They
that's
want to
the
be a
important.
community.
That's the importance of it being voluntary. The wealthy gave their money in abundance. They've already done that. So now it's time for everyone else.
Okay, everybody else. Okay, and I like what you said, the importance of community. Okay, Brenda. You're on mute, Brenda. Brenda, sorry, we're not hearing you. You're still on mute. One second. Caroline, are you able to unmute her?
I could ask to unmute her. Yeah.
Okay, Brenda, you're on mute.
I'm
Brenda.
sorry.
Go ahead.
All right. The important point is that everybody is part of this community, that he wants everybody to be seen as part of the community and for them to feel that everybody is part of the community, whether rich or poor or whatever,
Exactly.
everybody's included.
Exactly. Okay. Anybody else in the room? Any thoughts or go ahead.
Yeah, I don't understand how a slave could be wealthy as comparison to the other slaves.
Thank you.
But the whole concept of being in the midbar, the desert or whatever they call the wilderness, was to nation build. And they went from families to a nation. And this was all part of the concept.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We're going to read on. I'm going to go to the next source here. One second. Okay. ויאמר משה אל כל עדת בני ישראל לאמור, זה הדבר אשר ציווה אדוני לאמור, קחו מאיתכם תרומה לאדוני, כל נדיב ליבו יביאה את תרומת אדוני זהב וכסף ונחושת. Moses said further to the whole community, again emphasizing the whole community of Israelites, this is what Adonai has commanded. Take from among your gifts to Adonai. Everyone whose heart is so moved shall bring them gifts for Adonai, gold, silver, copper. This is all to build the Mishkan, to build the tabernacle. Goes on to say, so the whole community of Israelites left Moses' presence, and everyone who excelled in ability and everyone whose spirit was moved came, bringing to Adonai an offering for the work of the tent of meeting, and for all its service, and for the sacral vestments. Okay. Now, I just want to emphasize that if you compare the Hebrew, it's much more pronounced that on the one hand, it's a command to give these things, but the Hebrew is very beautiful. It says, Kol ish asher nasa'o libo. Everybody whose heart, libo, his heart, everybody whose heart was moved. So this was obviously very moving to everybody. And people, their hearts were moved and they showed up and they donated. And then it goes on to say, V'chol asher nadvarucho. Everybody whose spirit spoke to them. So the emphasis in the Hebrew is much more on the heart and on the soul. That's what moved people to actually show up and donate and give everything that was needed for building the tabernacle. Sorry? Preaching, but doing it well. Okay. So, go on. Okay. So Rabbi Sachs, who simplifies things often, and that's why I like to read him, speaks of the spirit of community. And I'm going to the next text here. What Moses had to do after the golden calf was vayikal, to aggregate, to bring everybody out, to make a community, turn the Israelites into a kahila, a community. He did this in the obvious sense of restoring order. When Moses came down the mountain and saw the calf, the Torah says the people were parua. In Hebrew, it's parua, meaning wild, disorderly, chaotic, unruly, tumultuous. He saw the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control, and so became a laughingstock to their enemies. They were not a community, but a crowd. He did it in a more fundamental sense, as we see in the rest of the Parsha. He began by reminding the people of the laws of Shabbat, of Sabbath. Then he instructed them to build the Mishkan, the sanctuary, as a symbolic home for God. Why these two commands rather than any others? Because Shabbat and the Mishkan are the two most powerful ways of building community. The best way of turning a diverse, disconnected group into a team is to get them to build something together. You need to cooperate, right? Hence the Mishkan. The best way of strengthening relationships is to set aside dedicated time, like Shabbat, like we're doing here, when we focus not on pursuit of individual self-interest, but on things we share by praying together, studying Torah together, and celebrating together. In other words, Shabbat. Shabbat and the Mishkan were the two great community building experiences of the Israelites in the desert. Okay, so before we move on to the next topic, I see that there are some hands. So Jay, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I hope I reserve the right to come back later because I think there's another community time a little later in the Parsha. But, the question of building a project to build community, there's a huge counterexample in the Chumash, right? So you have to kind of reconcile that because, the building of the city and the Tower of Babel led to fragmentation and disunity. So sometimes a common project that doesn't necessarily mean community building.
Okay, I hear you. I think the difference from Bavel, and we don't have to debate this too much, is I think the story of Bavel, it kind of went to their head. They wanted to build too much, too high. Here, I think it comes on the heels of a disaster where really it's sort of, in my mind, it's back to basics. It's really sort of getting together. But I totally hear what you're saying, Jay. Absolutely. It could have gone the other way. Okay, go ahead here.
And also the golden calf is another counterexample.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
So.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. I
If you could
had
just
to-
speak to the speaker so that people can hear you.
Okay, so I was a French major, and I majored in the 18th century when people were beginning to say liberty, equality, fraternity, and our country is based on that philosophy, and that philosophy came in very, very, very late, and as a citizen with very little power, prestige, or money, when I try to agitate for policy, I am very often shunned and left outside of the group. So they are not practicing liberty, equality, fraternity. And I am amazed that this is way before the 18th century. And these guys knew human nature, the same human nature I have to live with as a poor, poor organizer. And it works, damn it. It works. I am thrilled with this.
I'll say another thing. Absolutely, I totally agree. And I'll say another thing, and it's not as part of your text, but one of the things that's proven is that when people get in a group, the dynamics change. You feel, whether it's peer pressure, whether it's the need to do the right thing, how can I not do it? And everybody's looking. It's that spirit of being together in a group that absolutely changes. People step up suddenly.
That's right.
People step up. Tomas.
Thanks for the repeat. I'm reminded of another phrase that has in some ways been corrupted over time, which is from each according to their ability,
Oh,
to
yeah.
each according to their needs.
Yes, Bentham,
Which
yes.
is Bentham, exactly, and I guess a little bit after the Declaration of the Rights of Man. But this idea of from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs, I love that we have a British source in Rabbi Sachs, because I may have shared this anecdote before, but the scholarship on Stonehenge, which we might compare to the Mishkan, is this very mysterious structure with unspeakable and unspoken spiritual intent in the middle of nowhere. The scholarship has really changed on Stonehenge, because it used to be like, oh, this thing must be so important that they've mustered these resources from like hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away, historically, what, 1,000 years before
Yeah.
Exodus. And that, you know, this one spot in Salisbury Plain and this one location and this one structure, this perfect circle, must have mattered so much that they did all these weird, esoteric, difficult things, like importing stones without wheels from thousands of miles away. But the scholarship is really flipped. And they've said, no, 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 it wasn't that this place mattered. It was precisely the other way around, that they made it difficult so that it would require all of this social organization.
Absolutely.
And this annual ritual of repairing and adding, and like, okay, why another ring? Well, it was another year, we needed to get people together again. And
Exactly.
that in this kind of shamanistic spiritual way, the physical structure is secondary
Exactly.
to the primary mission of organizing the people. So there's actual like archaeological
Absolutely.
evidence for this re-theorization of the object. It's
Excellent.
always the process and never the product. Which I
Absolutely.
love.
Excellent. Thank you. And Paul, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to point out another dialectic, which is that previously in the narrative, we've had a focus on the priesthood. And here we have a focus on its opposite, which is a non-temple container for the spirit or manifestation of God that the people itself are helping to create.
Absolutely.
And what the wisdom of this, in the wake of the golden calf, is the realization that you needed.
Hi, could you speak into the mic a little bit more? Sorry for interrupting.
You desperately needed multiple sources of spiritual connection to God. That just relying upon the elites, which could very well have been the creation of the golden calf. It was a creation of gold and precious objects led by Aaron. And God and Moses recognized that that was a unworkable model.
Absolutely. By bringing everybody, you're kind of balancing things out, and this may be an interpretation to Orach Chaim, maybe. Thank you very much for that, Paul. Okay, we're going to move on here. We'll move on. We'll come back to it then. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next part of this, where it actually gets amazingly fascinating in my mind. Enter Betzalel. Okay, Betzalel. Okay, so now we're going to read about Betzalel. Okay, I'm going to read the English about Betzalel. So Betzalel, just to repeat the background, God calls out Betzalel by name. And he says to Moshe, you have to get this guy. You have to get Betzalel to do the work. He's going to be your lead architect. And God also says you have to get, Betzalel will be supported by Oholiab. Okay, so now, here's what happens. We're going to read the English. Bear with me. Okay. This is Midrash Tanchuma. Elihu disclosed, I said, days should speak and multitude of years should teach wisdom. But it is a spirit in man and the breath of the Almighty that giveth them understanding. So the spirit in man and the breath of the Almighty that give them understanding. All of the understanding possessed by Bezalel came from the Spirit of the Almighty, and it was instilled into him. And he hath filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom. So this is what the parasha says. And he hath filled Bezalel with the Spirit of God in wisdom, understanding and knowledge. He was wise in his knowledge of the Torah, in understanding, because he comprehended the law, and knowledge, because his mind was full of learning, and in all manner of workmanship, according to its plain meaning. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, in this world my Spirit instills wisdom within you, but in the future I will implant my Spirit within you, and you will be restored to life, as it is said, and I will input my Spirit within you, and you shall live. Now, what's very interesting here, okay, we'll move on. The point here is that Bezalel was absolutely full of inspiration. He was guided by the Spirit of God. In other words, the text here emphasizes the knowledge and the skill and the know-how, but it's much more clear in the Hebrew text that it was about the inspiration that he was carrying around and the inspiration that he imparted on everybody else. It was about the inspiration. The text also says that he was able to teach. He was a teacher, lehorot, which is the same root of Torah. He had an ability to lehorot. God gave him the ability to instruct. Interestingly, Bezalel came from the tribe of Judah, which is considered one of the more elite tribes, whereas his partner, Oholiab, was from Dan, which was not such a successful tribe. So the two of them became partners. Again, this is showing the inclusiveness of all levels, all socioeconomic levels of the people of Israel had to work together. So these two architects, they were artists really, they embarked on building the tabernacle. So they had to work together. Okay.
Do we know the meaning of the name? I see.
Yes, and I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to that in just one second. Yeah, okay. So here we go. Just looking for my text here. Okay.
Missing the source, right?
Yeah, I think so, but that's okay. That's okay. That's why I repeated it. I realized that the source didn't make it here. Okay. So the question, really good question. So Betzalel, really important. Betzalel. You can break that up into three components. Be, preposition be, in, sel, shadow, and el. Betzalel, in the shadow of God. That's what the name means. So Bezalel is moving under the shadow. Now, you say that in English, it's got a negative connotation. The point is, he's always under that positive covering. God has his back. He's Betzalel, under the shadow of God. Interestingly, I haven't seen this in the text, but if I translate it myself, Ohel Li'av, Ohel, it also means the tent is my father. So if this is reference to like the tent of, what's it called? The Ohel Moed, the tent of, yes, the tent of meeting is my support, is my father. So both of these names have rich meaning that actually support their actions, what they do. So Bezalel and Oheliav embark and they instruct and they inspire to get building. Okay. So here's what I want to do next is I want to talk about a few things about it. I'm looking at words. What's so interesting, sorry?
That's a great word.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of Hoover's, one of the few clear statements in I Am Thou is all true living is meaning.
All true living is meaning. Very relevant. Thank you. Okay. So now what I want to do now is talk about
With respect, before you move on, if there's comments from the Zoomagog about what you've talked about so far, could you entertain them?
Let's move on. We'll come back, Jay, if we have time. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So now I want to talk about some key words, and it's very interesting. If you in Hebrew, when you read about Bezalel, he's called in Hebrew an artist, Oman. Everybody, all the Hebrew texts refer to him as an artist, Oman. Okay, now, here's what's so interesting. If you look at the screen, the word Aman, Aleph Mem Nun, means artist. Bezalel is referred to as an artist, Aman. Omanut is art. Umanut is craft. Emunah is faith. And amen means truth. So if you look at all of those words, think about it. Art, faith, belief, amen, all from the word amen, the root amen, which means truth. So if you think about Bezalel, who is referred to as an oman, as an artist, and you think it also means faith, think about that. Faith, believing, and truth, and art, all the same word. And that is really, really, really fascinating. Now, why is it fascinating? It's fascinating because if we ask ourselves, what is Bezalel's role here? What is his role? So here I actually want to open it up. He's a believer, he's an artist, he has faith, and I want to emphasize what is his role, mostly as an artist. So I want to open it up on the screen at home if anybody kind of wants to answer that question. What's going on here that Bezalel, why is being an artist so important? And what is Bezalel's role here? If anybody wants to comment on the screen, on the Zoom, please raise your hand. Now's a good time. And I don't know, Jay, if this is something you wanted to address now or just from before.
Yeah, no,
So Miriam, go ahead, Jay.
no, I wanted to talk about community in terms of the Don Judea thing, but if we have time.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, I see Miriam, your hand is up. Miriam, we're not hearing you. I think you're on mute.
On mute, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, speaking of Miriam, in the Torah Women's Commentary, I was remembering it was from, I think the Parsha from last week. There's a midrash about him being, Miriam being married, the husband of Caleb, and him being the great grandson. And that, I think it's about like a lot of his knowledge coming from her too, making that connection. And so I don't know if you know about that midrash.
I do. I know he comes from a very noble, respectable family. I do know that about him. Correct. I don't have those details right here now, though, but I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, and they kind of connected to Miriam shunning evil, and that it says here she became the great grandmother of Bezalel, known for his skill, ability, and knowledge. So kind of making some connections there,
Absolutely.
things there.
Absolutely. Okay, anybody have any thoughts about his role as an inspirer, as an artist? What's going on here? Go ahead.
I wanted to say that every year at this time, I wonder why wasn't Aaron punished for leading the people to the golden calf? You know, and I never saw a connection between that and we've gone, that he gets the whole community to be creative. Omanut represents creativity. And instead of punishment, he says, this is what we are going to do now. So no one feels punished or reprimanded for having submitted to falseness, false prayer, but puts their whole self in what is going to be building everything, a good community. And I think to myself, that's a wonderful lesson for me or anyone that wants to lead to a higher level.
In other words, I think that's a really good point. Emphasizing the creativity, the constructive, as opposed to the penalties and the destructive. Absolutely. Okay, I see Judy Young's hand is up. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to speak to the idea of the connection between art and inspiration. I think that's a very deeply ingrained idea. This, think about the muse, for example, going back to the Greeks. This idea that art can be divinely inspired. That's my thought.
That's a very, very, very good thought, Judy, and I appreciate that. And it's going to be a nice segue into our next text, but absolutely. So just well, I won't make any conclusions yet. Colleen, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, it's reminding me of an experience I had in the past. So I used to be a violin maker and restorer, and I had this moment that I've never forgotten, which is I was sitting in a window that receives a lot of light at a certain time of day. And I was using what was, it's a tiny, we call it it's a tool that fits on your finger, and you use it to shape the inside of the instrument. And I was sitting there working quietly, and the light suddenly hit the inside of this unfinished instrument. And I had this moment of time slowing down, and this almost like a revelation of this connection between my breath and my hand shaping this piece of wood and the light streaming in and emphasizing all of that. It was almost like a religious moment, which hasn't been repeated. But in a way, I think of Bezalel as an artist and the importance of elevating our actions. That is, we're all artists in some sense if we're building and creating.
Absolutely, and I completely agree. I think that the power of art, again, to inspire community, and there's a very interesting interface between art and religion, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, Richard.
Verse 35:2, Ta'aseh Malacha. Rabbi David Wolfblank cites a Hasidic rabbi that says that could be read as work done as if by itself. And perhaps the Bezalel as an inspirer was able to create that cohesion of purpose, and so the work was just done because everybody wanted to make fill a role and make a contribution. So that those two seem to connect. The work is done by itself.
Absolutely. Okay, so Bezalel's role, and I'll summarize. Jay, is your hand up again? Sorry, I don't want to miss you. Is that?
Yeah, but Jill is before me.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, who is that?
Jill is before me.
Okay, Jill, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see your hand. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So I have a question. So who do you think was more of a leader? Moses, who kind of led us in understanding God's words, or Bezalel, who led us in understanding how to build creatively?
Okay, so I will answer that, but I see there's a lot of responses here. My answer to that is they are not mutually exclusive. You have different types of leaders, and I think a good leader like Moshe was skillful to say, hey, right now we need an artist. We need somebody who will inspire, somebody who, it's interesting that none of these texts, they all speak about his wisdom. In the English, it's all about the wisdom. It's all very cerebral. If you go to the Hebrew, it's all about the heart. Sometimes your leaders need to inspire and really speak to the feeling. So I think the answer is both. You need Moses, but you also need Bezalel. And Bezalel is acting now on behalf of Moses to achieve what he needs to achieve. And Tomas, I think you wanted to respond to that.
Well, I just wanted to reinforce your point and to pick up what you said about punishment and Aaron. One of my first professors of architecture defined architecture as the most direct way of bringing the unseen world into the seen, the ineffable into the tangible, the invisible into the visible. That there is an unseen world out there, and what architecture does is bring it into the seen. And through visualization, manifestation, construction, and all the rest. And it seems to me that that's the equal and opposite of the priesthood. The priest is there to convey the seen world to the unseen world. That as sort of an ambassador, right? To whatever we conceive, we project it forward into the unseen. Architecture and the architect is the absolute equal and opposite. And in some ways a lesser art, right? To bring the ineffable into the tangible, to kind of bring it down to earth, right? Rather than to project it up or elsewhere. But I think they're very complementary roles.
Absolutely. Thank you. And sorry, Jay, you keep getting pushed aside.
I do. Thank you. I do have, look, in terms of the language, I think I have a very simple-minded answer with Betzalel and creativity. How we introduced to Betzalel, Ruach Elohim bo, the Spirit of God is inside him. That use of the phrase vis-a-vis a person as an internal quality is only used one other time, but with another person. But where are we first introduced to the concept of Ruach Elohim? I think it's verse 2 in Bereshit. I mean, talk about creativity. The creativity of the entire world is based on that Spirit of God, Merafefet, that beautiful image of just
on the water.
Going over the waters. So we're coming back now to a person who, in essence, Betzalel, in the shadow of God, has that same quality of creativity inside him. And I think those two are linked in a very profound way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in other words, to me, this parasha shows us how important creativity is actually for emunah. So that's where I see the link between emunah, which is faith, and omanut. Those two really inform each other. Okay, very briefly here in the room, and then we'll keep going.
Robert Schumann is quoted by Kandinsky as saying, "Send light into the darkness of men's hearts." That is the duty of us.
Excellent, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. This debate is even a bigger debate. So the debate here, and you can see on the screen, are we talking, in other words, this is the debate, the beauty of holiness, or the holiness of beauty? In other words, what is our objective here? Is the holiness, the religion, the beautiful thing, and everything is serving, any art we do is just serving that? Or is the beauty an objective in and of itself? So Betzalel's role has sparked the rabbis to debate the dilemma of what is the role of art in Jewish theology. Is it about the beauty of holiness, where art merely facilitates the holiness? Or can we permit art to be an end in and of itself, which is what Rabbi Sachs called the holiness of beauty? Contrary to other religions, Judaism diminishes the visual arts.
Yes.
And this stems from the biblical prohibition against graven images. Lo ta'aseh lecha pesel. This is one of the Aseret Dibrot, one of the 10 Commandments. Graven images associates them with idolatry. So Judaism has always backed off from the visual arts, only very, very rarely. And that's why this is so unique. We have Betzalel, an architect, really kind of elevating the importance of the arts for the purpose of believing, emunah, where as opposed to just being a religion of words, here I think art really plays a really important role. I want to read one more text before we open it up another time. So Rav Kook, who was one of the, I think he was a pre-Palestine rabbi in a pre-Israel rabbi in Palestine, he writes the following, September 9th, 1935. When I lived in London, I would visit the National Gallery. And the paintings that I loved the most, so again, this is an Orthodox rabbi saying, the paintings that I loved the most were those of Rembrandt. In my opinion, Rembrandt, says Cook, was a saint. When I first saw Rembrandt's paintings, they reminded me of the rabbinic statement about the creation of light. When God created the light on the first day, it was so strong and luminous that it was possible to see from one end of the world to the other. And God feared that the wicked would make use of it. What did he do? He secreted it for religion, secreted maybe, it for the righteous in the world to come. But from time to time, there are great men whom God blesses with a vision of that hidden light, like Bezalel. So Bezalel suddenly emerges. I believe, says Kook, that Rembrandt was one of them. And the light in his paintings is that light which God created on Genesis Day. So what I'd like to do here is just kind of open it up a little bit more and ask folks, what role should art play in our religion? Is it just facilitating religion, or is art an objective in and of itself? And the other thought I have, aren't we all just manifestations of the godliness? I think there's godliness not just in Bezalel, but in all of us. So when we do our art and when we do our religion, we're kind of doing God in both aspects. So I just want to open it up, really starting out on the screen. What is the role that you think in your life and in general that art is, and should play in religion? Any thoughts on the screen? Raise your hand. I see. Is Jill? Is your hand up again? Or is that from before?
Yeah, actually, I would like to make a quick comment. For me, art is the most immediate experience of Hashem. I feel like it's a direct, the most direct communication, because I don't feel like when I write poetry, for example, that I think about it, or it's somehow my own mind. It comes quickly. It comes and leaves, and so you try to catch it when you can. And I feel like that's kind of how our spiritual lives can be. We can be quickly inspired, but as quickly as we are inspired, it can leave. And so when an artist tries to, not to use the word capture, I don't like that word, but capture it. Can't think of a better word, but it's the most immediate experience of Hashem.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's do Barbara, and then Jay, and then Judy. Okay, Barbara, Jay, Judy. Go ahead, Barbara.
Morning, Shabbat Shalom. I've always felt that in Judaism, art, music, it has been somewhat missing as opposed to some of the other religions. We're very wordy religion. We think a lot about meanings of words and texts, and I think, and let's talk about architecture and how the Christian community created these vast, beautiful spaces in which to be inspired and feel connected to God. We use words. I personally believe that music can give us, music and art, music for me in particular, can give us a visceral experience of God, because we can, like yesterday was Bach's birthday, we can become in the presence of genius by experiencing their music. And through that, we experience God, because just like Rembrandt and the way he used light was, according to Rav Kook and me too, really inspired by, and God was coming through. I think that when we're in the presence of kind of great musicians and great artists,
Thank you, Barbara. I need to, sorry. Let's move on.
I could lecture on this for 3 or 4 hours.
No, I know. I really, excellent. Totally agree. Let's go. Judy, and then Jay, and then Alina. Judy, Jay, Alina, and then we'll do the rest. Okay, so Okay, sorry. Let's do if you could be brief, we're going to do Judy, Jay, Alina, and then in the room. Okay, Judy, Jay, Alina, but please be brief.
Okay, very briefly, I just wanted to bring up the concept of Hidur Mitzvah, the beautification of the mitzvah, the mitzvot. Think about, we have the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candles, and we make these beautiful candlesticks to display. Or, we bring in beauty in so many ways. I could go on that point, but just the whole concept of Hidur Mitzvah, I think, needs to be lifted up.
Exactly. And so Hidur Mitzvah, Hidur is the glorification of the mitzvah, and that is sort of that straddles between art in and of itself and art as a facilitator, because Hidur Mitzvah says you can do art and beauty if it's supporting the mitzvah, which is not quite going as far as saying, hey, the art is in and of itself. Okay, Jay.
Yeah, I want to address that because I think I want to widen what we're talking about here. I put Hidur Mitzvah in the chat, and I see that as a narrowing of the concept, as a supporting role. And I would like to broaden it. I think we're talking about creativity. And what we mean is creativity that results in an object that then can serve as inspiration that can be appreciated by other people. That's my definition. So that includes, and unlike Jill, I don't wait for inspiration. I'm more like the fashioner of jewelry, whatever. I spend hours revising and thinking and all that to come up with a poem. And the same way that you might spend hours to fashion a Dvar Torah or a lesson plan or something like that, which is itself also a creative act. So I think we're really talking about creativity that results in something that can inspire, educate, motivate other people.
Amen. Thank you, Jay. Okay, sorry, in the room, go ahead.
I was going to say that God gave people free will, and art is the way that they express their free will.
Okay. Okay. Dorit.
I wanted to, I was very impressed by what Rob Cook said about Rembrandt, about the light in Rembrandt's drawings, paintings, because his paintings are very dark.
But light.
Dark, because
Wait,
a lot of it is through the years, the paintings are darkened, but I think they were originally very dark. And I think the only way you see light is by the contrast with darkness. And that is also what is like so impressive about like ecclesiastical architecture is like, it's so dark and then the light streaming often like through colored glass, is awesome.
That beautiful contrast. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
I can see where you get this from because Rembrandt, his one of the most beautiful. So the Jewish Bride by Rembrandt, it paints this beautiful portrait of a Jewish bride and her husband. It was a painting of Jacob wrestling God, right? David and Saul, right? These are all painted by Rembrandt, and he painted this illuminating, fascinating concept of just faith, godliness. And so I could see where
the light, absolutely, light and the contrast.
Rembrandt is very famous for just these kind of religious, faith-based paintings that are quite.
Okay, one more in the room. Go ahead.
Briefly, on the narrow ridge, why choose the way of beauty or aesthetics and the way of religious worship feed each other beautifully, amazingly. And in Buddhism, it said, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, which is to say, everything in this created world, form, is pure spirit, and pure spirit is everything, is matter. And matter and spirit are endlessly in a dance with each other, you could say, or could be even seen as the same reality looked at.
They inform each other. Yes. Okay, Tomas.
Thanks for indulging my commentary repeatedly. It's just because we're in my alleged wheelhouse of architecture.
I was hoping you would be here this morning, honestly.
No, I'm very grateful. I should say in this crowd that when I was studying for conversion with Rabbi David, who is in our thoughts today, he was like, "Yeah, how about Bezalel as your Hebrew name?"
Oh.
And I was like, "Dude, I love you, but I cannot carry that. Like, let's go with like Yaakov, because it's a lot. It's a lot."
It'd be a big
But
burden.
I've always claimed it as my like Jewish nickname.
Okay.
Because it's the one architect we actually get to hear about. But just to your question about beauty as a means versus beauty as an end, thinking also of Rabbi David, one of his constant reminders is not to mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon, and that's a Zen instruction. And architecture is called the mother art. It's been called that for centuries. But it's for two reasons. It's first the mother art. By respected authorities, my friend. And there's two reasons. The first is that it requires all the other arts, to manifest architecture, poetry, engineering, painting, murals. Like it's the mother. It needs them all, and nurtures them all. But the other reason it's been called that is that it's the art least in service of itself. Because architecture, I always argue, is really much more of a service profession. I think it's much closer to medicine, weirdly, than to something like Rembrandt, because it's just shelter. That's all it is, and it's great when we can do it with artistry, when we can do that effect, for example, in ecclesiastical architecture with light, and we can muster those aesthetic tools to bring us to emotional states. That's an amazing artistry. But architecture is a service profession. It has no end in itself. And I really think it's important that this is architecture and not actually art, even though there's so much art in it.
Okay.
Because architecture is an act of service. That's all it is, ultimately.
Okay.
And to say that beauty is an end in itself, I really think is just shading towards idolatry.
Okay,
Exactly.
no, fair enough. And I'm going to interrupt you there. I want to go quickly to,
No,
I see that
no interruptions.
Neil, your hand is up, and then Brenda, and then I think we have to stop. So Neil, go ahead.
I just want to draw us back to the possibility that Bezalel, as an artist, was possibly 13 years old, and the age and creativity involved in youth versus experience and age. And as we get caught up sometimes in words and the adult understanding of creativity and connection to the divine, I just want to bring that in and bring it back to the first thing that you brought in, the wonderful teaching today about Moses assembled. Rabbi David Wolf Blank says about, and Moses assembled, as he channels in his Metaparshiot, he said, as the guide within each person inhales the entire soul, deeply within, every part of the personality feels moved to gather together. And just want to call us into a possible opening to not only experience, also the youthful part of ourselves. Debarti.
Thank you, Neil. And Alina, go ahead. Alina, sorry, I skipped over you. Go ahead, Alina.
Thank you so much. I rarely say something, but to me, what this is all about is that the Coet is pointing to the invisible, that the invisible has such a powerful role to play in all of everything. And the whole building of the Mishkan is actually pointing to the invisible from the visible.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Alina, thank you. Okay, Brenda.
So I'd just like to expand a little on the idea of what an artist is and who is inspired. And the word inspired means, of course, in spirit, which is the spirit of God, so to speak, right? And so I think calling the whole community, we talk about the inspiration of one man or two men who were especially inspired in a certain way, but they're asking the whole community to be inspired and to and I think that that's what we all need to look at, that everybody has gifts, not just the ones that we see especially gifted, but that we all have gifts that we can share, and they all come from God, so to speak. It's all of the in spirit that's within each of us. So calling the whole community to contribute is in a way a metaphor for that. Recognition of all of our spirits and all of our human agency, which is so important in doing anything, that it's through that inspiration that's God given, but we have to use our human agency in order to accomplish anything.
Thank you,
And
Brenda. And
we
I
all
think that's
use our individual gifts. And they're all
absolutely, and I think
equally valued. I guess that's what I'm
And I
saying.
think that's a really good way to wrap this up and summarize. I think the beauty of being at in a community where everybody shows up, everybody is inspired to bring out whatever they have, whether it's a lot or a little, anything, and it's that being in the community that actually brings that all out. And that's the power, I think, of today's parasha, is about community and inspiration and what you can achieve together that you can't achieve when you're splintered. So with that, we will end, and thank you, everybody, for joining. Okay.
I read somewhere.
All right, Jeremy, I'm going to mute you guys. Great work today. And am I going to be on? Yes, I will be on next week. See you soon.
Brenda, I love what you said, that we all have our contributions. And I think that is the beauty of this portion, that even, that every single person has something of value because it's coming from that pure place of creativity, that channeling of the divine that's not, it's us as a conduit of that creation.
I think marrying that to my point about broadening the notion of art to talk about creativity, I